Hi everybody, I'm Keith McGuire. Mark Hicks is behind the camera. Today we're going to do a landscape. It involves rolled bales of straw. It's a scene kind of common around where I live, farm country, and it's I think they're fun. They're kind of cool. I love seeing them out in the field. This particular painting is going to have, it'll be later in the day, and these things will be casting a long shadow. So I'm going to begin with the sky. I'm going to grab my Lowell Cornell 7020 ultra round brush, which I love. They hold a point. They hold good water. They're just very nice to have.
Hold on.
What?
You moved my camera angle.
Sorry. You heard that.
Debating on leaving it in, you jerk. Is this where everything's gonna stay? Yes. Slide. Don't move it.
All right.
You should have moved it before we started.
Well, I didn't realize that I was... all right. Say when.
When?
When. All right. So I'm going to start with a little bit of my cerulean blue. I'm going to put it on my tray. I like to pull it from the the other tray. Okay, put it in my butcher tray. I like to add water to it. The reason I like the metal butcher trays is I can peel off a little bit of the color and get it as light as I need it. And it doesn't just all bead up like some of the plastic trays do. So I can see what I'm grabbing. It's a very handy tool that I use a lot. I love metal butcher trays. So I've got my cerulean blue. I'm actually going to pull out a little bit of my ultramarine blue too. Sometimes I combine them to get a little different sky color. Not quite so warm. By adding a little of the ultramarine blue, it kind of cools the sky down, the sky color down a little bit. Now I'm going to put some clouds in here.
Real quick, what kind of paint is that?
This some kind of scrappy paint that, this is Schmincke's. You can actually read it on the little thing right there. These are Schmincke paints. They are pan paints, which means there's no liquid in them. So they're concentrated color, pure concentrated color. And this is a particularly good brand, and this has very good pigment, excellent pigment. They also try very hard not to use the strange, deadly chemicals that used to be in paints. Cad reds, what else? Manganese. Everything's kind of, they found alternate ways of not poisoning the
environment. For all the people that used to eat their paint?
Yeah, I still do. I try. Anyway, so it's an excellent brand. They're out of Germany, and they know their paint. All right, so I'm gonna wet the areas where I want the sky to be, the blue sky, and I'm gonna leave the areas where I want the clouds to show up. I'm gonna kind of leave it alone. And I'll kind of blend it all together once I get some color in here. But the paint only goes where the water is, unless I, force it. All right, so got a little bit of color. I'm gonna start applying the paint. Now, watercolors, I've mentioned this before, but I'm gonna say it again. Watercolors dry 40% lighter than when you apply it, okay? So they dry a lot lighter. So you have to kind of compensate for that. And it takes a little while before you get comfortable. I'm often wrong, and I have to go in and maybe put another layer in. But it's just something you want to kind of think about. Keep it in the back of your head. Now, sometimes people like, they like their clouds just going across the sky. vertically. I like to kind of put a swoop in them. A swoop. So that the clouds don't look like they're always, you know, just static. I like a little action sometimes. So, and by creating maybe a swoop, a diagonal swoop, it looks like they're kind of really flowing over your head rather than just in front of you as a static thing. Mark's back there wondering, what the hell is he talking about? All right.
Now I'm wondering what kind of paper you're using, Keith.
Oh, what a good lead in. Anyway, it's this is 140 cold press Arches watercolor paper. I like Arches because it's durable. It's great for professionals, but it's really great for amateurs who possibly need to who make mistakes. You might have to scrub something out a little bit. Hey, it's a good paper. It's tough. It's 100% rag cotton, so it's not paper. Uh-oh. My phone is talking to me.
Did they call you boss?
Yeah. Look, I...
Take any respect you can get,
yeah,
if it's from a phone?
From a phone, yeah, I try. All right, so at this point, I kind of like what I got here. And I'm not too worried if it gets into the background trees. I like to bring the color down past my horizon so that I don't have any blank spots or I have to worry about, you know, trying to, you know, get my trees up to the sky. So that sounds like a song. Yeah. Anyway, so at this point, I'm going to let that dry. Meanwhile, I'll work on the lower section while this dries up. So I'm going to take a little bit of yellow ochre. Mark says I like to paint a lot of dead stuff. I like dead stuff. So we're going to do a field. This is a recent... there's 2 times of the year they bale straw, and one of them is in the spring. And I love this time of year because everything's kind of real young. The trees are very young, the green and everything. But you have this, you know, the old winter wheat. It helps give you this beautiful... it's not the... I'll think of a word. It gives you a... It isn't all green. That's the trouble with Michigan. Everything's green. Green, 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 green. And so when you get a nice field of dead grass with some nice yellow bales sitting on it, it does make a nice contrast. So this time of year, I like to go out and hit the farmers. I got to turn that off. All right. So as you can see, I don't put it in all at once, and I'm not wetting the paper first. I'm just kind of dragging my brush across, kind of getting it wet. But as you can see, I'm not hitting every bit of the paper because I want a little variation in color. So that's what I'm doing. I'm leaving it so that I can put some... When I put more color in later, it'll be a little bit lighter or a little bit darker. Won't all be the same. So I'm going to start applying a little color to the foreground here again. It's going to be just a little bit stronger. I'm sorry, this is yellow ochre. I'm also adding some Venetian red to this, so it isn't just yellow. And this will be my final little hill here. It'll all become apparent once I start putting the straw bales in. These are rolled bales. They're huge. Huge. As Mr. Trump would say. All right.
President Trump.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, yes. We support We support our president. All right. So, right now I'm putting in my last little bit of hill. And you can kind of start seeing where the little straw bales are, oops, are going to be. All right. I do have to take this one. Kind of made a little mistake, so I'm just going to gently blend it up and out of the way. There. Okay. So, bottom's wet, top's wet. I guess I got to take a break right here, okay? And then we'll come back. So we're going to let it dry thoroughly. All right, we're continuing with the landscape with the hay bales. I am now going to do a little bit of the background. The trees, the little bit of woods in the background. There's also a field that, an uncut field of fresh stuff, not dead. Mr. Hicks. All right, and I'm going to start, and it's got a few trees in it. So I'm going to start by grabbing some paint. I am grabbing right now cobalt green and a little bit of the May green. This is a proprietary color, I think, of Schminke's. However, it's very similar to a permanent green light. All right. I'm going to start doing the foreground of the background. I know there's got to be some way to say that intelligently, but
the middle ground?
Yeah, maybe. Starting to feel like Spicer. I don't exactly have the words for what I want to say. Again, I am not really wetting the paper much, a little bit. I'm just kind of applying the paint. But there's enough water in the paint. I have to emphasize that. It's not acrylics, it's watercolor. So you really, when you're doing watercolors, it's kind of really important to use water. I've seen people, they apply it like it's paste, like it's an acrylic paint. You got to let the water do some of the work for you. That's what makes it kind of loose and wet and fun and pretty kind of thing. It's the water. All right, so as you can see, I'm kind of doing this foreground trees right at the moment, but I'm not putting in any definition yet. You'll also possibly notice that the two paints that I used, I didn't mix them too heavily. I didn't blend them into one color. What I like to do is kind of mix them together, but not to the point where it becomes a new color, but rather it's kind of a mixture of the two. And what happens is you put them on the paper, a lot of times the paint will separate a little bit as you add water, and you get these wonderful blooms of different, the dark, the light. And I like that because then I can take and make them into branches, different kinds of vegetation, maybe along the ground, that kind of thing. So, which I will show you eventually. Yes. All right, so here's my clump of foreground trees. I haven't broken them up yet. There's a little bit of weeds, a little bit of... I'm also going to run along this one edge. These are kind of maybe some weeds that separate the two fields. Right there. All right. Now, I'm also going to put in a set of trees that are a little farther back. But what I want to do with these is make them a little bit darker. And I'm going to add a little less of the May green, a little more of the cobalt. But I'm also going to add a little bit of the cerulean blue, just to get a little bluer tint to this. And am I still in the picture?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. And I'm going to do another set of kind of trees back here. So obviously they're farther back. And again, I'm not really defining anything yet. I'm just kind of putting in my background base greens to get it started. And I'm not really worried about what kind of trees they are. They're deciduous. Yeah. It's one of those kind of trees. So, not pine. How's that? Why can't I say it? Okay.
I'm not even going to try.
Oh, come on. Deciduous. I can't say it. That's funny. All right. Let's not worry about it. As in not pine. There we go. All right. So I got one more clump of trees in the background. And then I have my far tree line in the back. So they're going to be faded. We want them much lighter in value and color. We want them kind of grayed out is basically what we're going to do. So I'm going to take a little bit of green. And I'm going to mix a little bit of the May green in. So it's kind of yellow-green right now. But now I'm going to gray it down by adding just a touch of red. Now you don't need a lot. You can see I just took that kind of bright, happy green, kind of grayed it back so it's not so happy peppy. Okay? So, as you can see, it's not very thick. And I'm going to take that, and this is going to be my far tree line back here. Okay, now this one, I'm going to kind of wet it a little bit so that it doesn't get, I don't want it to get too heavy. So if I have water down already, I think that'll keep it from getting too dark. Now I start the color at the bottom. I'm going to let it kind of bleed up. Okay, am I proper? Okay, I just want to make sure I'm not.
Don't worry about it.
You'll say.
My job, you do yours.
Yeah, you'll say something, I'm sure. All right, so as you can see, I'm just letting it kind of bleed to where the water stops. It won't go past that unless I really tip it and it dribbles. Okay, so there we go. This is never going to get any darker than that. And when it dries, I'm kind of hoping it'll be a little bit lighter. So, as you can see, it kind of looks faded, farther, distant. All right, so I'm still a little damp here. I can't really do too much. I could probably, these darker trees that I want to put in over here, I can make them darker. I can do that too. So I'm going to add, again, quite a bit of the cerulean to the green. Because I want this clump, at least along the base, and I want it to have a nice shadow across that field. So it's got to be on the darker side. I'm just going to do the Darth Vader. Okay. All right. So good. So that helps pop that in front of the farthest horizon tree line. So we'll let that dry up. And while the greens, I think I'm okay. I'm going to, also if you're going to touch something, just test it. Tap. Don't rub, okay? I see people do this and scary. But yeah, tap lightly and you'll probably have less trouble. So this is, I think, kind of dry enough that I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to put the bales in. So I'm going to go with a little more of the yellow ochre, a little less of the brown in it. Okay, I've got a little bit in there, a little bit of the Venetian red, but this is going to be mostly yellow ochre. Now I'm doing it dry. I'm just taking almost the side of my brush, I'm kind of dragging it a little bit, just to kind of give it kind of a rounded motion, just to kind of give the bale a feeling of roundness. And I'm not doing the end caps right yet. I'm just getting the sides of the bales right now. Now for the ends of them, I'm going to add a little violet to my yellow, kind of give it a shadow cast. But first, let me get all these sides in.
Where are you imagining your light source is coming from?
It will be from a very extreme right to left. So yeah, we're not even there yet. It'll get real obvious when I start dropping shadows in here. Now I have some of the bales are going behind the hill, so you won't see all of it. And you won't see their shadows either because they're behind the hill. But and then this one's back in front again.
So what you're saying is if you don't want to paint as much, just make hills.
Yes, exactly. If you want to hide things. There's
a whole village behind that hill.
Yeah. There's several squirrels in my painting that you cannot see. All right. Yeah, find the hidden squirrel. All right, so I've kind of laid those out now. And yeah, I have to pause at this point. Is that okay? All right. I am about to start with the bales in front. I'm going to put the end caps on them, basically. I'm going to paint them. But I'm going to take a little bit of violet now, which is the complementary color of yellow. And I'm going to mix it with the yellow ochre. I'm going to kind of get a brownish cast. And the reason I'm doing that is the sun's coming from the other side. So this side of these bales should be in the shadow. So I'm just going to kind of give them a little more value on this side. Now, these are not my final colors, so if you're wondering, well, those look kind of brown and dull, we are going to brighten them up a little bit with a little more color. But for right now, I'm just kind of getting that shadow end painted. Alrighty. Trying hard not to stick my hand in what I've painted. All right. Okay. Now, I don't know if you can see it, but, you know, obviously some of these bales are slightly behind the hill. Behind a hill. How's that? There we go. Which I'm actually now trying to maybe make it a little darker too, using a little bit of violet in the paint. There we go. So you can kind of see that they're a little behind. All right. So now I'm going to start brightening this up a little bit. Just kind of plain yellow ochre. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. And let's see if we can get a little more color into these bales. Now you don't have to do it. I like to kind of break them up a little bit so they have a little light and dark. I'm going right over top of what I painted earlier. So I'm kind of embedding this yellow ochre color into the bales so they show up a little bit better. Like I say, you don't have to get them completely wet. All right. All right. Yes, yes. Okay. I'm happy with that for right now. I am now going to put in another field back here. It's going to be on the much happier green side. So once again, I'm using a little bit of the May green. And I'm mixing it with a little bit of the cerulean and the green oxide. No, the green. I forgot what color I called it. Oh, let me just look. I have all my paints on a little sheet so I can identify the colors. This is cobalt green dark. So, but I don't want this too dark. I want this to be kind of a spring green field back here.
So which three colors is it again?
So I use the cobalt green dark, a little bit of the cerulean blue, and a lot of the May green. Or if you do not have May green, the permanent green light. So as you can see, it's a happy color. And I'm just going to kind of blend this field in. I'm just going to push it right into the trees there. And underneath these other trees, just, you know, working my way around here. So the field in the back there obviously wasn't straw. This is like a new field of some crop. We don't know what. Don't care. Don't care. All right, so.
I've never grown don't care before.
Yeah. Now that, while that dries, I'm going to let that dry actually. And I'm going to break the trees up a little bit. Give them a, give them a little, few weeds in the front, give them branches, give them some depth. Right now, it's all just one big green blob. And now this is where I start breaking them up. So I'm going to use the same 3 greens, but in different, amounts of color. Okay, so now I'm probably going with a little more of the cerulean blue to kind of break it up a little bit. I'm going to start defining the trees. So I've kind of painted a heavy line with paint. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bleed away on one side the color. So as you can see, I took a wet brush and all I'm doing is kind of breaking that up a little bit. And now I've brought this tree to the foreground. The middle tree, let's put it that way. All right. To the foreground. And I got some shrubbery here. Also in the foreground. So I'm making this tree a little bit on the darker side. That helps break the trees up a little bit. So on this side, this tree here, I'm going to have it in the background. Again, I'm going to make this tree more the foreground, but I don't want this side to be as dark as this side, so I'm using a little bit lighter. I'm going to use a little bit lighter color now. Okay. So we do this in steps. You can't do it all at once, but you get you can kind of get the idea what I'm doing here. Are we okay?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. Like I said, I don't always know when I'm spinning things around and getting out of frame. So it's kind of like working with negative space. As I can push things farther back by continuing to get darker and darker and doing it in basically layers. So I'll have light, then I'll do a middle value, and then if I want to get even darker to help create a more three-dimensional chunk of trees here. All right, so now, along the base of these trees, there's probably weeds, old growth. As you can see, I kind of left a little area here. So what I like to do is I'll take a little bit of the yellow ochre again, and I'm just kind of going to bleed in some color here. So I'm pulling some of the green down. Into this yellow. That just kind of Trying to get it kind of like brambles or brush or weeds along the base of the trees. Okay. So I can't do too much. I gotta let that set up for right now. I'll go back in and I'll just keep adding layers to create more and more three-dimensionality. Now over here, again, I want to be very... Oh, grabbed the wrong color. I want to be very careful.
What color are you grabbing?
I am again using the why do I keep forgetting its name? Cobalt Green Dark, and the Cerulean again, because I want this dark. I want this to. This represents kind of the back end of a chunk of trees here, so, and I want them to be dark no matter what. So I'm just adding a little more value over here. And I'm just going to kind of maybe bleed it off a little bit. But okay. Now, is this dry? This is, but this isn't. This isn't quite dry either, so I'm just going to leave it alone for a minute, but I am going to turn that into a field. Okay. With kind of rows in it. All right. So while that's drying back there, I'm going to add a little more texture to the grass in front, maybe a little more color. And I think I accidentally put a little green in there. Oops. All right. So again, using dry brush, I just kind of come in. Now, dry brush means that I did not wet the paper. I'm just applying it. It doesn't mean the brush is dry.
That's just the ochre again?
There's a little bit of the Venetian red in it, but pretty much I'm just using the ochre, yeah. Yellow ochre. Okay. So I'm just adding a little more color. I want it to kind of stand out a little bit. And I want the hills to be actually using a tiny bit of Naples yellow, which is kind of an opaque yellow. It's very pale, but it's I'm using it as a color to kind of help break up these yellows a little so it isn't all just yellow ochre. Okay. All right. Now to get a little more depth to the bales, I'm kind of dry brushing a little bit of line work into them. Nothing too serious. But I'm also going to start adding a little of the Venetian red and a little bit of the violet, because I do want these things to appear roundish. I've got to have a little bit of a...
And I need to reset the cameras in a minute.
Okay. I'm just putting a little value towards the bottom of these guys just to make them appear a little more round. So, I don't want to stick my hand in the paint anymore, or, you know, I don't want to stick my hand in the paint. So I'm going to take a pause here, let it dry up, and we can start again. All right, I'm going to start using a little bit of detail, kind of finish this thing up, okay? At this point, what I want to do is I'm going to start with the field in the background here, and I'm going to give it a little rose to make it look like it's been planted with something, God knows what. Michigan, it's probably soybeans. So I'm just gonna create some line work here. It doesn't have to be perfect, just has to be consistent. So I don't care, you know, what you're doing. Just, you know, try to make the lines, you know, appear going in about the same direction. And they can roll, they can do different shapes, but as long as they're, you know, doing consistent line work. Now, as you can see, it's a little bit wet, the lines that I put in. What I like to do then is, with just a little bit of water, and hopefully you let it kind of set in for a little bit, but not till it's dry. What I like to do then is just take the brush with a little bit of water, just kind of blend it in so it isn't like these hard lines. So you get the feeling that there's something there, but it isn't quite a definite line. So you got a little field in the background, got my little hay bales in front here. I'm going to add just a little more shadow to each one. Again, I'm using the Venetian yellow ochre again, and just going to give the ends a little more color because it looks like I kind of bled some of it off. There we go. So, or they dried lighter than I would want. So I'm just adding a little more value here. And then also, we get these couple front ones here. All right, so at this point, just going to add a little more value to each base of these things so they kind of look round. Now, some of these are, you know, behind the hill a little bit, so we're not really going to see all the way to the bottom, but that'll work. Okay, and same here. Just want to add a little bit. Okay. Now, going back to these trees, everything's kind of dried up a little bit. So I'm going to go back in using a little bit of negative space again. I'm creating more or less some weeds in the foreground here, some taller grasses, because this is not cultivated. It's kind of under a chunk of trees. So I've put the lines in, but then I'll take and bleed the tops off. But you don't want to, you want to make it still look like there's, you know, weeds there. So you don't want to blend it all the way. You want to leave some of the edges, the sharp edges that create the leaves in the foreground there. And then I can also start breaking up the trees a little bit into branches. This, all I do is take this, create these little shadow pocketed shadow areas. Okay, I just, you know, I'll blend a little, I'll leave some hard edged, but we're gonna, okay, see how I've got dark, light areas. Okay, I'm gonna do that again for this tree. Just gonna kind of now this side of the tree might have a little more shadow on it too, so I'm gonna bleed that in a little. But see, this is all dry. I'm just adding, you know, little lines, dots, blurps. Okay, and then I'll just come back in and kind of soften some of them. So it has the feeling that it all isn't just one big tree, but it's got branches and clumps. Okay. And I'm going to add on this back one back here. I need shadows to be a wee bit darker, so I've added a little more color, a little more value to my, and a lot more of the cerulean to kind of deepen it up. Missed. Okay. So the idea is, you know, the light hitting these trees, you know, all the leaves don't all face the same direction. So you get light and dark areas, you'll get shadows. Little shadow under the tree, under the trees. And then I let that set up. Oh, I lost, I guess I blended away my lines a little too much. So I'm just going to go back in real quick and kind of do it again. So it happens. So I'm going to let that set a little bit. I'm going to wait before I hit them, soften them with a little bit of water. I just don't want to accidentally blow it all away again. Oops. Okay. My background tree line back here. Now that I've got more color in, I see that it's a little on the light side, so I'm just gonna add a little more color just so it shows up a little bit better. Okay. Now, let's see if I can do this without killing everything. There we go. All right, so now I've got most of my base color in, my sky background. The only thing I need now is to get some of the shadows onto the scene itself. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to wait 1 minute for it to dry. So, if we can take a break, I'm sorry. We are about to conclude this painting. Mr. Hicks says we have to move on. So, last step in this painting is to apply some shadows, and I'm going to apply long shadows to some of the background and some of the, obviously, the hay bales. So, Michigan, summertime, it gets very late. You know, the sun goes down very late. And so you can have like full blue skies and some long shadows at 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And this is kind of what I'm doing. I still want blue sky, but I also want to kind of show that it's pretty late in the day. And shadows, as the sun goes down, obviously, get longer and longer and longer. So I am going to put in some nice long shadows into this painting, and thinking that, you know, it is kind of late in the day, but not so late that I would be getting sunset colors. Okay, so I am just gonna apply this particular bale right here. Is kind of up in front of the hill, so we're gonna be able to see this one. So I'm just gonna add a little burnt sienna to the mix. I'm actually thinking about maybe a tiny bit of indigo, which is a blue-black.
And that was the yellow ochre, and what other color originally?
Venetian red. Another color for that could be brick red, Indian red. There's been, you know, different versions. All very the same color, though. Very close to the same color. I'm not going to say that they're the same color. So as you can see, I've dragged me out a nice long shadow from this particular bale. And I want to be able to see some of the others that are closer. So I'm going to maybe get one over here. This one you can't really see. It's behind the hill. These are behind the hill. But I'm just going to kind of get a little bit of that one going. All right. And then the rest of them, not so much. But what we do have is this block of trees back here. And what I want to do there is create a very deep shadow, a very deep long shadow on that field. So again, I'm mixing the same greens I've been using, but this time I'm going to add a little bit of indigo to it. So I can get a really nice, rich, dark, kind of bluish green. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this shadow, and this is going to be a long shadow too. But it's going to go all the way, dang near all the way across this field. Now to get the nice feeling of three-dimensionality, we want some of that hill to show up behind the shadow that we're casting. So that's why you see that I'm not right up on that edge. I want to be able to see part of that, okay? So I've cast a long shadow here under this clump of trees. And one of the last things I like to do is I'm going to grab, what color is this? I'm going to grab a little bit of sepia, which is basically a brown black, okay? And I'm going to add just a little bit of tree limbs and this foreground. I'm also going to change my brush. I'm going to go for a smaller brush. And I'm just going to create a few branches here, sticks, twigs. So, just to remind you, all branches, fat to thin, okay? Can't tell you how many times I see things, it makes me crazy, where the branches are actually get bigger at the top. It's like, wrong, don't do that. So again, I'm just applying some darker color here just to create a few of these branches in this clump. Kind of breaks it up a little more too, so it isn't all just green. And you want some of them to be a little softer than others. I like to kind of sometimes blend things away a little bit so it isn't quite as strong. Kind of pushes it into the tree a little bit more too. So this one's bugging me a little, so I'm gonna maybe soften this one up a little bit too. Okay, so for me, the last bits of work to something like this is then to maybe little line work, creating a little texture on your bales. Maybe a little texture on the sides. Give it that rounded feeling. And we're going to stop here pretty much, but I might go back after it dries. I like to wait a couple days sometimes, you know, take a look at it, see if I can add a little to it. But for the most part, it's, you know, pretty close to finished. So do we have any comments from the staff, or because I'm going to call this about done.
If you want to see which materials Keith's using again, there's a link in the description, takes you to his website, and we list all the paints, the brushes, the paper that Keith uses, so you can order the exact same thing or support your local art store if you want, but we keep everything listed so you know what he's using. Make sure to subscribe, like this video, leave us a comment if you have any questions. Leave a comment if you want to suggest something to paint next or a technique you want to learn. We're always looking for ideas, so
yes.
Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks. You guys take care. Bye.